Good morning, everybody. Apologies for the delay this morning. Slight delay on my side, actually, slight technical issues, but I am here. So welcome, everybody. Lovely to see you all. It is the celebration of Women in Football event on International Women's Day. Yay! Thank you for joining us. So a couple of bits of housekeeping before we get things going, of course. Can I ask you to keep your microphones on mute unless you're taking part in the networking session? Any questions, and I'm sure there's going to be quite a few today, which is all good, throughout the session should be asked via the question function, which I'll keep an eye on throughout the day. And very importantly, if you need to step away for any moment, make yourself a tea, coffee, grab some biscuits, stretch your legs, and you think you're going to miss anything, don't stress, it's all good, because we're recording all the sessions, so you'll be able to catch up later. So today's conference is organised by Fair Game UK, an organisation campaigning for football governance in fairness, openness and transparency, which is more important more than ever nowadays, right at the core. And it's making sure that the game, as we've seen over the last few days, we've seen over the last 2 years, is a force for good, and it puts clubs right at the heart of the communities that it serves. And it is growing all the time. The number of clubs that are getting involved, supported by experts and backed by, would you believe, politicians. So if you fancy getting involved, because, you know, volunteers are really, really welcome, and it would be great if you can, do get in touch with us after the conference and we'll share the necessary details for you. Also, a big thanks, a huge thanks to our premier sponsors today, Campbell Tickell. Campbell Tickell is a multidisciplinary management and recruitment consultancy focusing primarily on the public and not-for-profit sectors. My name is Anne-Marie Batson. I'll keep it very, very brief. I'm a sports broadcaster, proud of Essex, from Essex. I'm an Arsenal fan, would you believe? And my background in football is very varied, very much so. My dad, luckily for me, I had male allies very early on from when I was quite small. My dad used to play Saturday leagues, Sunday leagues. My uncle played professionally, so I was surrounded by football all the time. And my love of the game grew from there. And it was really after London 2012 where I felt, I was working the railway at the time, would you believe? So you want to know why leaves are on the line and it causes train delays? I've got an answer for you. Anyway, after 2012, working on that, I thought, that's it now. This is what I want to do. I want to get into sports broadcasting. And it's been a journey ever since. And I'm absolutely delighted to host this event to you today because it's International Women's Day, of course. And we all know what International Women's Day means from a personal perspective. I admire women who are forces in their industry and use their platforms for change and moving things forward. And they're not waiting for someone else to give them permission. They go out and do it anyway. And that's exactly what sits at my core for me. And that's what drives me each and every day. Okay, enough chat from me. We are going to now move to our first keynote speaker of the day. Kelly Lindsey is a highly respected figure within women's football and has represented the United States of America as a player. She's worked as a head coach of both Afghanistan and Morocco, and she was the first ever director of women's football, and I have to say this right, at the Confederation of Independent Football Associations, CONFA for short, and is currently one of the most talked about football clubs in the country, sporting director at Lewis FC. And Kelly's going to talk to you about a number of things, themes around exploring our own biases, reflecting on our individual and collective responsibility of growing the game, and some practical steps to take forward. So good morning, Kelly Lindsey.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. How are you? I think I got it unmuted now, video on, we're all set.
Yeah, good. I'm really good. Really good to see you. I'm loving the shirt behind you. Yeah, very good. I like it. All yours, Kelly.
Well, thank you all for having me today. I'm so grateful to be with you. I'm just such a big believer in anyone who's ever heard me speak before in dialogue. I think this is how we are transformative in life. this is how we're going to be transformative through football, because we all come from such diverse and different backgrounds. And until we can have the real dialogue, until we can really be open and honest and engage with each other, listen, learn, reflect, challenge, and support. And one big thing I've learned here in England, stay optimistic. I think that is an American thing that we have. And I think if we can all stay optimistic, we can grow the game together. So I only wish we could all be in a room together. But since we can't, we'll find unique ways to engage online. But I sort of feel like my life journey, I've been really fortunate because I sort of feel like I've been on the journey of women's football development from nothing to where we are today. And I feel very fortunate. And I do feel it's my responsibility to go out into the world and keep challenging myself to learn in different ways and share different stories and objectives, not because I'm right, but just because I think if we dialogue, we all learn together. So like so many people, I started football because my brother played. And I really felt very quickly that it became my game. It was something I was proud to do. And I'll never forget sitting on the edge of my bed at 5 years old. And I was looking up at this poster on my wall. And my dad walked in and he said, "What are you doing?" And I pointed at the poster. I said, "I'm going to play for that team one day." And my dad's response was, "Well, you better get working." And I often talk about this moment because I think it's moments like this that matter. Without thinking, without any sort of intent behind it, my dad's true reaction was, "Well, then you better get working." Well, that poster was of the US men's national team in the World Cup. And we didn't have a US women's national team at the time. So I ask you, as we start this conversation, to really reflect on that moment. And if it was your son or your daughter or your child who was transgender or non-binary, and they showed you a photo of a dream they had, and it didn't match what maybe you thought by looking at them externally, or your own personal opinions, or your own personal beliefs, or your own personal dreams for them, I just ask you to reflect for a moment of what your response would have been. And what would your response have been 30 years ago? What would your response have been 15 years ago? What would your response have been 5 years ago? And what would your response have been this morning? And I think really taking a moment to reflect on that and think about how you respond to such simple questions in the world can really inspire or deter a human being from pursuing their personal best. So we have a big, big responsibility in my mind about having these dialogues and thinking different and acting different, because we all come from very diverse backgrounds and we all sit in one room together. We all seem to have a collective agenda and a mission. In this concept, you've joined this group, you're part of Fair Game. You say you are a growing band of football clubs striving to change the game for good. So my big question to you is, what is good? And what are you really fighting for? What is your purpose and why is football your tool? Because until you get that deep, deep, deep in your heart and your soul, football can be a lot of fluff. And it's a beautiful game and it attracts the world, but it's also a nasty, disgusting industry at times. And I think that most of us, or many of us in this room, want to work in football because we want it to be a beautiful game on and off the pitch. Because it's not just a cool thing to do. It's not just cool to be a part of football and have that badge, but because it's in our blood to do something good for humanity. And there are many people in football that don't think like this. But the truth is, football is affecting human lives. And I really hope that you have a bigger purpose and a bigger value in your own heart and soul, in your own club ideas, mentality, ethos, and values, than just kicking a ball around. Because anyone can play football. But I think being part of Fair Game is really taking on this special responsibility to be a leader in your community, in your club, and for your country, because football will affect the leaders of the future for your country. And so I think it's really, really important that we think about what our future leaders need and what are we doing? How is football educating the next generation? Because if I'm honest, I never intended to do half the things I've done in my life. I never intended to travel the world. I've never intended to visit 36 countries and work in football in about probably 8 different countries and cultures and diversity. Never did I imagine this. I dreamt, like many young people, I wanted at first to be a teacher because my mom was a teacher, and I respected my mom and loved my mom, and I wanted to do what my mom did. Later, I wanted to be a physiotherapist because I was always injured. So I spent 90% of my time in the physio room. Later, I wanted to be a lawyer because as much as I love my mom, I love being a pain in the butt and causing her problems and arguing and trying to pick apart all the rules and values she was putting around me. So I thought one day I would be a lawyer. But if there's one thing about growing up in America that I'm very, very proud of, it's that we really ingrained in everyone that football or sport and education were equal. That if you were going to be great at sport, you also had to be great at education. And it was almost like you weren't allowed to be great at sport if you weren't taking your studies and your school serious. And although as a young kid, I didn't want to sit in class, I was antsy, I always wanted to cause trouble and ask questions. But at the same time, as I've left the country and traveled the world, and I realized that so many countries, it was shocking to me how many countries say that you either will be a sports person or you will get educated. And I just think this is such a disgrace to our youth and to the future. Because why can't you be both? And really, sport and education should go hand in hand. And wouldn't we want leaders of our nation to have grown up and developed in and around teams, character building, unity, challenges, problem solving, collective responsibility, teamwork? Like, wouldn't the world be a better place if the leaders of our nations truly grew up every day ingraining these values and these habits of excellence within them as a human, as well as on the pitch? So when you think about football and education and how you view it, and most importantly, how it operates in your club, I really ask you to reflect on what message are you sending to the youth of our country about who they are as a human and who they are as a future leader, if we don't unitely tell them that they can be the best in education and the best in football. Because you have a mission here. You are developing the future leaders of your country. And how you message us and how you talk about it and how you live every day in your club will make a difference. So are you developing future leaders or are you not? And I really hope that as clubs and human beings in football, we're reflecting on something so much bigger than just playing on the pitch. Because the truth is, I never set out to develop women's football, never. In fact, I didn't even understand all this feminist talk as a young adult. I was just a kid playing football, getting my education, and suddenly I landed into this professional world and this professional landscape because we didn't have professional women's football. My very first year as a professional women's football player was the very first year that America had a professional women's league. And I think we were the very first truly professional league in the world. So I was 21 years old. In those first 3 years, 21 to 23, we had this amazing GM in our club. She was brilliant, powerful, strong. She taught us so much about life. She taught us so much about how to be good human beings, how to respect the world, how to respect the game, how to respect the club. And she always talked about all these women's rights and women's empowerment. And I was 21 playing professional football thinking, what are you talking about? Look at us. We're playing professional football. Why do we need all these messages? And I have to realize, I've realized years later, that I grew up with positive culture bias. I grew up in the Midwest of America. I grew up in a place and space where family and community and the school system and the education really, really cared about me as a human being, really supported me. I was never held back. I wanted for nothing. I played with the boys. I kicked the boys' butts. The boys respected me. It was, you know, I didn't realize that my life and my background was actually a positive bias. And that affected me because I didn't understand this whole women's rights and women's empowerment until I was playing in this professional league, where now the world of women's football had come to our doorstep. The world had opened up, where now players from Brazil and Germany and Japan and China and England had come to America. And now we started dialoguing. Now I understood, as I retired and we moved on, how impactful and transformative this was to have these cultural experiences and diverse dialogues. Because when I heard Cece, who was the best women's football player in the world in the 90s and early 2000s before Marta, when Cece and her teammates, Katja, Pertinia, they're over in the league, they're scoring tons of goals. They're these legends of the game for those of us in the women's game. When they start talking about lack of opportunity, the way the national team was run, that they weren't allowed to have a football, that they were given dolls' heads to play with, and they wrapped it in newspaper and tried to tape it up if they could find tape or string or whatever. It just opened my mind. It planted the seed. It started to make me think that, oh my gosh, there's this whole other world where women aren't treated equal. Wait a minute, do I have a responsibility in this? And this is why it's so important when you go into your clubs that you get diverse backgrounds and diverse ideas and diverse experiences from men, from women, from people all over your community, from all different countries and all different nations, because we really need to listen and learn of these true experiences of people growing up and having different backgrounds in order to solve the problems of football, in order to take the dialogue to the next step, in order to talk about the things that really matter. Because as great as history is, evolution, we're here because of evolution. We evolve, we change, we grow. So we can stand on, we've always done it this way. This is what's right. But people are different now. Life is different now. Communities are different now. We're respecting humans on a different level now. Thus, football needs to evolve with it. And every day in your club, new and diverse perspective is priceless. And so no matter what our biases are from our past, no matter how we grew up, positive or negative, I think we can really take so much from each other when we can sit in a room and we can be honest and embrace our ignorances about where we come from, what we experienced, what we bring to the game, but also what everyone else brings to the game. And part of my life journey was really, I'm sitting in this world of being a professional athlete for the first time. This was the first time that I think women in America were probably really professional athletes, getting paid to do the job, to live the life. And I think it was after my second year, I had a very simple surgery. I was living the dream. I had a very simple surgery. I needed a cleanup of my knee. And I'm sitting in the hospital room. I'd had some complications and I ended up back in the hospital. And I'm sitting in the hospital room and I'm thinking, I'm 22 years old. I'm on top of the world. I have everything at hand. This is exactly what I've dreamed of my whole life, to be a professional athlete. And I'm here as a woman. And I was definitely not following the hospital protocols. I was not doing what I was supposed to be doing. I was ready to be moving. My doctor came in and he was a good family friend of mine. He had done all my surgeries up to this time. And he sat me down and he said, Kelly, listen, what you're going through right now is very serious. He goes, if you don't take this serious, you could die. And on some level at 22 years old, death is over your head. But I remember going to bed that night alone in a hospital room. And if anyone spent time in the hospital, they don't smell good. They don't sound good. You hear all the beeping. It was just sort of this epiphany moment where I sat there, beep, beep, beep. And I just thought, what if I don't wake up in the morning? What if the doctor's right? What if I never live another day? Am I proud of myself? What have I lived for? And it was really this moment of sort of deciding, if I was laying in the casket and everyone was talking about me on my funeral day, what would I want them to say? What would I really want them to say about me? And I realized in that moment, I don't want them to say anything about me as a sports person or a football player or an athlete. That really means nothing, because although it's great to become a professional athlete, and although it takes talent and sacrifice, the fact of the matter is, what does it do for the world? What does just playing sport do for the world? And although in that moment, I couldn't wrap up my life experience and know at 22 years old what my purpose was going to be in life, I knew at that moment, and I decided that my life needed a purpose, that just playing football, just doing sport was not what I was most proud of. And of course, at that age, you want to be a good person, and you want to be a good friend and a good daughter and a good family member. But it's planted the seed that there needs to be more purpose. And if football was my tool and football was my vehicle, what really was my purpose in utilizing it? So as you think about your career and you think about running your football club, I hope you have real purpose. I hope you're thinking about what your club and your community can do for humanity and all of humanity, one, in your community, and two, beyond into the global landscape. Because if you are a club in England, I think you have a lot of power. The world watches and pays attention to English football. So if we get it right here, we can transform the world. If we get good governance and financial sustainability, and we develop amazing human beings through football here in England, we can be extremely transformative for the world to see we can create a model that's unique. So as you really think about your club and your community, what are you trying to change? What is good? What is great? What are you standing for? And where really is your voice? What are the conversations and the dialogues? What is your epiphany about what football does for the people that you want to affect most? And are you thinking about all people? Because this group here at Fair Game, if you really are a tribe, if you really are a collective, then you can have each other's backs and you can share each other's voices and stories, and you can be transformative. So I hope that you reflect a little bit. And as you reflect, do you really pull in everyone into your story? Do you really pull everyone into your legacy? Or are your first thoughts about a certain aspect or pillar of the game that means the most? And how does that affect the other pillars around it? So obviously we talk about values and we talk about purpose and we talk about football. And when you work in a football club, you see the ethos and the values, and we're going to stand for this, we're going to stand for that. And you always have to take a step back and say, is this cliche or is this the magic? And I think a lot of people use these values and these ethos and this purpose as cliche. We stand for this, we do this. But when push comes to shove, when the decision's on your doorstep, are you strong enough to walk away and do what you believe in and what you stand on? Or do you go the easy route? Because that money, I needed that money for the club. We're in the red this year, we need that. So it's not just to talk about your values and your purpose, but are you going to live it? Is it going to be meaningful? Are the people around you going to live it and feel it? Because I was lucky enough to grow up, and I really, you don't know what you don't know until maybe you leave and you see the rest of the world. But I grew up in a time in football and sport in America where we valued education, and that changed my life, because I might not have taken school seriously, but I ended up with a great education, a very diverse education, because the culture around me and the culture of football told me I had to. I grew up in a time in America where there was character building and leadership curriculum in football programming. Still around the world today, that often gets mocked or laughed at. It's not ingrained in everything we do. But if you're going to develop a professional footballer, you have to develop a professional person. So character building, leadership curriculum, this programming, social and emotional learning through football needs to be ingrained every single day. And I was so fortunate to have high performance psychology as I grew up. And the part of this was by being on the national team. I was so lucky. And at 16 years old, when I first got into the national team, if I'm honest, when we had our first sports psychology meetings, I thought, what is this nonsense? I don't need to be told how to think. I don't need to be told how to overcome challenges. I know, you just run through brick walls. That's how you overcome challenges. But once again, upon reflection, and I think if you talk to so many young people, I don't need that, I don't want that, I don't have time for that. I was a bit of the same. But upon reflection, I was so fortunate that someone was ingraining these little details about my character, about my leadership, about my mental health, about the ability to overcome obstacles without me even appreciating it. And now when I reflect back, my life has been totally changed because I've had that high performance psychology. And I hope that as we develop and we build football and you really think about your clubs, it's just not about playing the game. Because for me, character is really what football is developing. Why are we doing what we're doing? What matters most, that extrinsic success or intrinsic success? And every country I've been to, it's different. In Afghanistan, we spent a lot of time talking about that nationalism will trump sexism. So how will we get people to see women as equal? We play good football. It wasn't about winning everything. It was about playing good quality football, because when they saw women play good quality football, suddenly the respect changed. And when I came to England, it was all about promotion or relegation, promotion or relegation. And I think realistic ambitions are really, really important for people here. The whole world doesn't revolve around what you do on a Saturday or Sunday, but the emotion here is so high and so low. Are you making good decisions for your club and for your people when you're trying to win at all costs? So as a very young coach, I really went through a phase of, I'm going to choose character versus winning at all costs. And trust me, it's not an easy balance. As a very young coach, I had very high expectations because I had played professionally, and now I went into the game as a coach. And when people hired me, it was like, oh, you know how to win. You come here. One of my very first head coaching experiences, I only won 4 games in the entire season. Talk about feeling like a failure. Talk about ego diminished. But you know what? It was the most impactful year of my development as a coach and a human, and for the players. When you talk to players from that team, we'll all laugh that we only won 4 games, but they will say that year changed their life. That was the first year where they realized what they could be as a human being beyond football. And for me, young coach, putting my ego out there in the world, it was so much more important that these women walked away feeling like they could do anything in the world. Because winning football games, even if we had won 20, even if we had won the championship, would never have changed their life the way going through those hardships did. So as you think about your club, you think about what you're trying to build, you think about your organizations, I think you also have to really, really reflect on what is success, what is successful. Are you winning at all costs, or are you trying to build a culture that develops leaders for your community and for your country, and potentially for the world? These are the questions to answer. These are the questions that start to change how a club operates, how a club dialogues, and where a club goes. It's not mutually exclusive. You got to find the balance. But at the end of the day, if you're developing leaders for the future, your legacy, you can always feel good about. And as you go through these processes, are you hiring people who are really trying to develop human excellence? Really trying to develop this culture in your club? Are you chopping and changing every 6 months, every year, because you haven't won the championship yet? And I know it's a huge investment to develop football. It's a massive investment. So when you're laying there on your deathbed, are you going to be more proud about how many promotions you had and how many championships you won, or how many people's lives you affected in a positive way as players, as staff, as volunteers around your club? What are you really trying to build? What are you really passionate about? And along with culture comes professionalism. And I use this word a lot. I think change of all changes is that we have this professional mindset in how we do business, because often when you deal with men's football and women's football, the decisions made for men's football come from a very distinct mindset. And the decisions made for women's football will come from, well, I guess we have to do it. So tick the box, let's get it done. Put someone in place, let's get on with it. And it's absolutely paramount that we talk about what professionalism means in our clubs and for our people and in the process that we develop. So ironically, recently I was interviewed for a role and I got asked a question which I found profound in 2021. As director of women's football, how will you engage with other departments to try and develop the game? How will you work with others to influence them to support women's football? So I thought about that for a second and thought, this is 2021 in a first world nation. If I need to influence your organization about the importance and value of women's football, you have a lot of work to do. This is your country. This is your community. These are your young women. This is your legacy. Why do you not have people in your organization who already want to develop women's football? Why do you not have people in yours that already value women and diversity? And if you reflect on your club, do you have people in your club who truly value women's football, men's, women's, youth, equally? Because if you don't, nobody can teach you. You need to bring in the people who value it already, because that's the world we live in. And if you haven't and you don't, that's on you. That's your legacy. That's your club. That's your values. That's your ethos. So I don't think you need people to tell you it's important. I don't think you need someone on the outside to come in and build the bridge. What you need is to have the people in your club who already believe it. Because it's the reality, it's the future, it's the truth. And if you don't, it's a bigger reflection on you and the people you're working with than it is on the world and where it's headed. Now, we spent about 2 years in Morocco developing women's football. And I remember being told when I came in, women don't want to play football. Women don't play football here. This isn't important to women. And I could go on and on about all the successes we have, but the reason I want to bring this up is we have a lot of successes in a very short time, because the truth is women do want to play football. Women want to coach, women want to manage, women want to lead, women want to be part of the performance staff. Women love the game, women love sport, women want to be as high achievers, if not more, than men. So let's just start with that. And the reason we were successful is not because of me. I'm one person. The reason we were successful is because we had a team of 8 people, 7 of which were men, and they thought equally. They had the professional mindset that every decision we made was equal between men, women, and youth. And that every opportunity we had, we looked at it. What do the men need? What do the women need? What do the youth need? And we didn't come up with a one-size-fits-all solution to everything. We bespoke the solutions to each gender, each age, each level, because that's how you develop the game. You have a professional equal mindset. You take a structure of how you think and how you operate, and you stick it into each section of the game, pillar of the game you're trying to develop, and you come up with those bespoke solutions to the problems that you're facing. And when you can do that, the game grows quite quickly and quite efficiently. We're always going to run into problems. But when you're working with a team and a tribe and a band of people who think professionally and equally, you can get things done much easier. So as I kind of try to wrap things up here, I just want to say that so much of this comes down to you and your purpose and your values. Because until you really know what you stand for, it's extremely difficult to dialogue about it. And it's extremely difficult to, when you hear something or see something that you don't like or you want to challenge in the game and the development in your club, are you prepared to do it? So for me, I have a very simple purpose in life. I'm cultivating the place and space for people to be their best in the moment they're in. And I stand on this in everywhere I go with any decision I make. So it has nothing to do with women's rights or men's rights. It's humanity, it's people. We are all equal, we are all the same, and we all deserve to have opportunities to pursue our best. And I see my role in my job to cultivate that place and space wherever I go, to open doors, to unlock things so that people can perform their best and pursue their personal best. And if we did that in every club and every organization around the world would be transformed. And over my years of coaching and developing myself as a leader, I've really sort of landed on 3 key values that have stuck with me from a very early age. 1, do the right thing. Do the right thing and be willing to walk away when you have to compromise yourself so much that you can't do the right thing. Because at the end of the day, I sleep very happy, healthy, and whole because I can live my values out every single day in any environment. And I'm willing to speak up for them. And I'm not compromising myself to anyone. Controlling the controllables. Every day I can bring my attitude, my work ethic, and my respect for the world and the people around me. And if I operate on those 3 things, then every single day I know that I'm giving my best to the people around me so that they can live and pursue their best. And the one thing you'll learn working in women's football and trying to develop the women's game is no excuses and a never quit mentality. People will come with a billion problems in how we develop the game. And I remember standing in front of a room in Morocco, over 100 men, and somebody said something about the problems of developing the women's game. It's like, absolutely, we've got a billion of them and none of them matter. None of them matter. Because if we come with this no excuses, never quit mentality, we will overcome every single problem that ever comes in front of us because we take it step by step with a professional mindset. We put high quality resources around it. We will overcome. And you need to think about that with every problem that comes forward in your club, every problem that comes forward in your organization. You can either accept excuses or you can find and make sure you find people who are solution finders, problem solvers, and put them around you. Those 3 I stood on for a long, long time. And in my last probably 10 years of life, as I really started to travel abroad and see the world from a different lens and a different perspective, I've added 2 to it, which I think definitely build on all the challenges we're facing across the world in the development of our clubs and our organizations. Live humble and hungry. People who are only pursuing the money, people are only pursuing the fame and the ego and all that, it means nothing. It won't make you happy. It doesn't develop the game. The game is not about you. You have the power to change it. You have the power to cultivate it, but it's not about you. The game is about humanity. And we have to take our ego out of it and be very humble. And we have to keep ourselves hungry because it is hard. It is long. It is every night, every weekend, every holiday. So you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself and you're finding a way to keep yourself hungry. What is that new mission that aligns with your values and your purpose? What's that next step of development? How do we challenge ourselves in a new way? That's what will keep high performers excelling. And you want high performers around you in your club, in your organization. You want people, this is my last tip, you want people, the secret to success is seek people who are smarter than you. I want every day to be the dumbest person in the room. I want to hire people who educate me, who challenge me, who teach me every single day, because I want to be great. And I can only be great if I'm stupid and I embrace my ignorances. I can only be great when I recognize what I don't know in life. And then I start to learn it and I start to educate myself in a new way. And if you build this, if you really focus, none of this has to do, absolutely none of this has to do with money and power. This is all about a mindset. This is all about, do you really believe in it? Do you want it? Is it your passion? Is it your purpose? Are you willing to be humble? Are you willing to put people around you who are different and diverse and will challenge you in new ways? Because if you do, you will be unbreakable. Your club can accomplish anything and overcome all boundaries. And the last thing I'll leave you on is, if we really want to drive out the bias in the world, it doesn't take talent or money. It takes you. It's your 1%. Because we talk about the small gains in sport and football. It's that little drip every single day of you ensuring that there's equality in your club, that you're holding these dialogues, that you're holding people accountable. It's your 1% that will change the game. And so I leave you with this one last reflection. Your 1% is contagious. Is yours worth catching? And I wish you guys an amazing day ahead. And Anne-Marie, if we have time for questions, I'm more than willing to take them.
Wow. If you didn't feel motivated and energized to get on with your day and the rest of the week, my goodness, because I'm ready to take on the world after that. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you, Kelly. That was absolutely amazing.
Welcome.
I thought it was fab. I wrote down your 3 values. You talk about do the right thing, which, for those who remember, that was a film years ago by Spike Lee, which still resonates with me today. But it's that line, isn't it? It's always, do the right thing. Absolutely important, I think, even more in today's world, for sure. I really love that. Control the controllables. I must say, Kelly, it took me a bit of time to get my head around that when I was in my teenage years, my early 20s. And now that I'm a bit older and wiser, I understand that now about things that you can control. And I feel better for understanding that now. So that's great. And no excuses. I was going to swear, but I won't, if you know what I'm saying. So, I think it was great. It was great. I mean, just, a couple of questions if we've got a couple of time. Just how much has the women's game, like you said, you've traveled to so many countries. You've been here, Morocco, Afghanistan, the States. Do you feel that the women's game has accelerated more around the world in the last 5 years?
I definitely do, 100%. I caveat that with why. And with all the influx of money coming from the governing bodies of the world to push the women's game forward, it's needed, it's super valuable. But my caveat to all this is you have to put the right people on the ground who will use the money in an equal way, and really passionately care about developing the women's game, because it's easy with these big organizations dishing out money, say, oh yeah, we have the women's game, tick. Yet they don't have a professional mindset. They don't manage it. There's no governance. They don't hire high quality people to manage the women's game. And I think that is the key piece. Is now we're in a place and space where there are enough high quality people around the world to manage and lead and drive the women's game forward. Let's make good decisions, and you will see the game grow in an instant.
Yeah, agreed. One person just said, Ian Bruce said, spot on, Kelly. So there you go. I think you've hit the nail on the head. And the other thing I want to ask you as well, how important is empathy now as well within the women's game? We hear a lot about emotional intelligence. Empathy is something that resonates me quite a lot. Does it with you as well as a coach and your work around the world in the game?
100%. I think I just want to caveat that with, it's not just empathy for the women's game, it's empathy for football players. There's a big thing in this world that suddenly at 16 years old, you are a professional football player. If you were in another organization, if you were running a global bank, would you say that a 16-year-old is professional in your bank, in your business, in your organization? So why are we telling 16-year-olds in football that they are professional? And it's almost like we take resources away and now we judge them much harsher just because they have a professional contract. Yeah. So empathy to me is huge on the men's side and the women's side. These are humans. Being a professional athlete is really difficult. Yeah, it looks great on the outside, but it is a really difficult, complicated job and career. You have a very short window to do it from 16 to, let's say, 30, much less for most people. You're going to put that whole life's work into those 10 years. Everyone's going to put the world of pressure on you. and you still are actually just learning to be a human, and you're actually learning how to pay your bills, and you're actually learning how to manage money and learning how to drive a car. And there's all these simple things in your life you're just learning. And we forget that athletes are human, and we judge them on such a high level. We almost beat them and abuse them before they ever get out of the game. So empathy to me is huge. Like, everyone has a different story. Everyone has a different problem. When we lead our organizations, players, staff, everybody, we're just humans, and we're not perfect. So we need to take everyone on the journey with us.
Hear, hear. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Kelly Lindsey, the sporting director, Lewes FC. Kelly, if people want to find you, are you on the socials?
I don't like social media. No.
Fair enough.
I'm on Twitter at Coach AFF WNT. But yeah, I like to fly under the radar, you know?
Yeah, I wish I could, but I can't, unfortunately for me. But thank you so much for your time and your very inspiring conversation, your talk with us this morning, and enjoy the rest of International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys too. Best of luck.
Thank you. Okay, now we are going to split into three, everybody, because we've got workshops coming up. So here's the deal. So in this room, it's going to be Women in Sports Media. And that's workshop number 2, and that's sponsored by Lane Clark and Peacock LLP. Some of the most prominent women in sports media are going to be sharing their thoughts with me, and our speakers include Jacqui Oatley and Anjana Gadil, and that's workshop number 2. Workshop number 1 is dealing with sexism. That's a conversation about sexism in the game and how to combat it. Very important. Your speakers there are Lucy Ford and Kaz May from Her Game 2, and that's chaired by John Scales. And then option number 3, if you like, is a networking session, which is going to be coordinated by Fair Games Strategy Director Caroline McRoyal. So choice 1 is workshop 1, dealing with sexism. Workshop 2 is with me, Women in Sports Media, or you've got your networking session instead. So click on your chosen link and I will see you soon.